The following is paid advertisement and does not reflect the opinions of this station. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements. The information presented in this program is general and is not intended to be legal advice and should not be relied upon or used without consulting a lawyer to consider your specific circumstances.
Questions about law, stories from the courtroom, cases that might impact your life. It's time for Tell Me I Have a Case with Dan Grimm and Matt Glenn from Cook, Barkat, Ponder, and Wolves. Find them at cbpw-law.com. Here's Dan Grimm and Matt Glenn.
Good morning and welcome back to Tell Me I Have a Case, the show where we invite you to take another look at the world of personal injury law. I'm Matt Glenn alongside Dan Grimm. You can find us at www.cbpw-law.com or 573-335-6651. Good Saturday morning to everyone out there. Dan, what you got going on this weekend?
This weekend is going to be action-packed. Something I am super excited for is called the Shipyard Festival. It's going to have a great lineup of bands down at the casino. It's going to be more of like a festival activity.
Yeah.
I've been to several other ones around Missouri, and I'm super excited about going to this one. And the band lineup is wonderful. They have
Who they got? Who are they bringing?
Oh man! So I think the big name band is the Yonder Mountain String Band.
Oh, nice.
Which is fantastic. Yeah. There's another band called Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band, which is amazing. And then I'm also excited about seeing Samantha Fish. She's got some amazing music. So yeah, and then on top of that, we got a SEMO football game.
Oh yeah, all right. Who does SEMO have this weekend?
Central Arkansas.
Central Arkansas. Now, where are they from?
Somewhere in Central Arkansas.
I would assume so. So, all right, if people want to go to the Shipyard Music Festival, how would they go about doing that?
Oh, they can go online. You can buy tickets at the venue, but it's a Friday night and Saturday events all weekend. And so yeah, there's going to be something for everybody there.
So it'll be last night and then tonight.
Yeah, that's correct.
If you're listening live.
Well, good point. Thank you.
As we assume our parents are.
Right.
Well, today we want to talk to you about the right to a trial by jury and the importance of that right, and really what it says about our justice system. Trial by jury, that is a concept that has really evolved out of our historical record, out of who we are as a people, but it's got its roots going, all the way back, I think, to the Bible.
Oh my gosh, yeah. No, it's you go. Think about it as far as the jury system is built on the base of Christianity, and you go back to the book of Isaiah, and the book of Isaiah says, "Come, let us reason together," which is essentially what a jury is a collective group of the community where the injury occurred.
Yeah, that was actually my dad's governing philosophy in running his church. He's a Presbyterian minister, and it was his belief that no one individual has a monopoly on the truth. Truth comes from a conscious or prayerful discussion among several people, and that's reflected in Western civilization, Western history, how we got to a jury trial.
Sure, yeah, and if you think about it, it goes all the way back to Old England. And I'm sure a lot of people recognize what's called the Magna Carta.
Right.
And prior to the Magna Carta, in Old England, King John would go to his cities, and if somebody had a dispute, you'd come into the courtyard, and King John, the monarch, if you will, he would decide the party's fates.
Right.
And then after the Magna Carta, which is in 1215, essentially the community around us today, we the people, not the monarch, not one person, we the people want to be the conscience of the community, decide what we value within our community.
Yeah, rather than just a one person, almost tyrannical sort of. I'm the king, therefore you do this.
Correct.
It's a reflection then of the community. It's something our founders valued very deeply. Our founders wrote our Constitution, and then they decided to put 10 amendments to it, the Bill of Rights. Just 10, right? And they knew they weren't making an exhaustive list of everything important to them, but they were writing down what was most important to them. And our 7th Amendment says, in suits at common law, where the value in controversy is over $20, this was 1788, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall otherwise be reexamined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. So they took the time to actually write that down. It is a rich part of our history.
Oh, and it's so true. And even people, I think there's a movie called Verdict, and people have heard the term verdict. And verdict is Latin, and it stems from common law. It means dic means to speak, and ver means the truth. So it's the common law, the idea of a right by jury trial by your peers is just so ingrained, so important to who we are as a people.
Yeah, it really is. And throughout our history, you've seen people refer time and again to that right and how important it is.
And it's actually so unique because there is no other system of justice like that around the world.
No, and it's meant to be kind of a reflection of what we as a community value. It's what, you can't have a rule for every situation, right? You just can't function that way. But if somebody does something negligent or does something, makes a mistake, a jury, a representation of the community, that's who come together and then decide, what the truth is about that situation.
Sure, and you always see disputes. And a lot of times the disputes they're gray areas. A lot of times there's things that aren't simply black and white. But again, the brilliance of having a jury, a group of 12, is they have collectively 400 years of wisdom in that 12, and they all come from different facets of different walks of life, and they together decide what they value as a community as to what that negligence caused or the injuries that are caused from that negligence. Yeah, it's so incredible.
Well, and at the end of the day, it's one valuable way that we hold each other accountable to each other. Just that we are able to be safe in our own communities.
No, and you see it time and time again. I mean, you think about Abraham Lincoln. He talks about the greatest act of citizenship is to serve on a jury. And I think it's something that we need to reflect on, because a lot of times think about it when you talk to friends or family, they get a jury notice,
right?
And the first thing you're like, oh gosh. But that's actually should be a situation where you honor it, because you're actually controlling and taking control of what is considered valuable within your community.
Yeah. Well, it's your opportunity to speak for your community. I mean, it really is a leadership position that you're being selected for. You get to speak for the people of, Cape Girardeau County, or Scott County, or Pemiscot County, or you get to be a voice to say, hey, this type of behavior in our community, we don't tolerate that, right? We don't allow that.
And it can be as simple as, and you and I talked about this from time to time again, is like, say we go down to Piedmont, we like to go down to Clearwater Lake, and those are 2-lane highways.
Right.
And I can drive from Cape Girardeau to Piedmont at the speed limit, which is approximately 50 miles per hour, and another vehicle is coming the opposite direction at that same speed, and we're only basically maybe passing a foot apart.
Right.
The reason why I can do that is the fact that I think as a community, we all together collectively, whether through jury trial or through a verdict, we hold people accountable that violate the rules of the road.
Right.
And I can drive without having an anxiety attack, knowing that more likely than not, that person is honoring our rules that we find valuable in our community.
Yeah, and I think most people do it without even realizing they're doing it. I don't know anybody who will intentionally stop at a green light.
Right.
When you approach
Right.
a light that's green, most people just keep their foot on the gas and they drive right through it, as you should.
Right.
Stopping would be dangerous in that situation, but you have faith that those other cars in cross traffic are going to approach that light and they're going to come to a stop.
Right.
And without that faith, without those rules, and without ultimately the enforcement, from either the police or from a jury, that it becomes harder to function as a society.
No, absolutely. And that's part of what, like you said, when we're called for jury duty, what you are there to do is decide a dispute, as a group of 12 deliberate, and to find and hold that person, that rule breaker, accountable for what they did, and also to value what was taken from that person by way of health or injuries, and to put a valuation on what that is. And there is no better way than the jury system.
Right. Well, and you had a great example that you brought up earlier that I think you should share with the folks at home about the window that gets broken.
Yeah. So, it's something as simple as you think about it, as far as an example that, a father and son are playing baseball in the backyard, throwing a ball back and forth, and, the young child throws a wild pitch high into the right and breaks out a neighbor's window. and the father and the son, go up there and knock on the door and apologize to the neighbor, say, "Oh, we're so sorry for breaking your window," and she, thanks that person for coming and being honest, but realize that the baseball broke a priceless vase inside the house when it went through the window. And then the father at that point said, "Oh, no, we're willing to pay for the window, but we're not willing to pay for the vase." That often is what we see, why cases go to trial, because someone is willing to admit liability. Yeah, I ran into the back of your car, but I'm not willing to pay full damages for what I've done to you by way of health, by damaging your spine or causing you traumatic brain injury. And that's where the jury system often is helpful, because a lot of people are willing to admit, I hit you, but I don't want to pay for the damages that were caused from my negligence.
Right. No, we see that. I would say the majority of cases we take to trial don't involve a dispute necessarily of liability. A lot of times they simply involve a dispute over, over what you said, damages. What has been taken from the person who was injured. A lot of you listening out there, you may not have had jury duty. If you ever get called, as Dan says, please treat it as an honor. Typically speaking, when we pick a jury, we're looking for 12 jurors and probably 2 alternates, so a total of 14 people. And to get those, we usually call about 90 potential jurors to come in for what they call voir dire. So if you get a notice that you've been called for jury duty and the trial does go ahead, you'll be seated in a room with 90 other people, and an attorney like myself or Dan will stand up and start asking you questions. And it's really one of the more unfair situations for you that can happen. We're going to tell you, you're going to have to swear that you'll be fair. You're going to have to promise and actually swear an oath that you're going to be impartial. But we're not going to tell you what you're going to be impartial about until after you swear that oath. I always compare it to, it's like being a parent, and your child comes to you and you ask them, hey, why you got a weird look on your face? What did you do? And the kid says, well, I'll tell you, but you have to promise not to get mad. And then they tell you, and through what I feel like is no fault of my own, I break my promise. Because why would anyone think that object belonged in the toilet and then have the toilet flush? So, I mean, it's a little bit like that, but it's really important if you get that notice and you go there that you just be honest with the attorneys that are asking you questions and tell them, your background, what experiences you've had that may or may not qualify you to be on a particular jury, because not everyone should be on every single jury.
Sure. And the reason why we can't tell you details about the case is because it's part of the rules of the court systems that we can't start talking about the case and jury selections. We'd love to tell you, but the judge, in just the way the rules are set up, that neither side can really talk about many details of the case in jury selection. So
yeah, we give you what we can, and a lot of it requires you almost to let go of some of the questions you might have. A jury is there to determine who is at fault for an incident, and then what the value of that injury is, and that's it. It's not the jury's job to determine who pays that value. Sometimes it's an insurance company, sometimes it's the defendant himself, but that question isn't relevant. It's not the jury's job to worry about whether the law allows their verdict to be the way it is. That's the judge's job. So you have to put your faith in the judge, in the Court of Appeals, and kind of, only stick basically to the role that you have, just like we do as lawyers. We stick to the role that we have. The judge does his job, and then we give the jury their opportunity then to speak the truth back to us.
Yeah, and when we talk about damages, I mean, often you'll hear this term that essentially your job is to be an appraiser of damages, and there is no formula, there is no calculation how you do it. It's your experience of 12 jurors, like I said, collectively 400 years of wisdom deciding what that valuation is.
Yeah. Well, that's it for segment number 1 of Tell Me I Have a Case, the show where we ask you to take a second look at the world of personal injury litigation. We'll be back in segment 2 with some specific examples about different cases that Dan and I have worked on, so stick around.
Cook, Barquette, Ponder, and Walls are very proud of the results they obtain for their clients, but you should know that past results afford no guarantee of future results, that every case is different and must be judged on its own merits, and that the choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements. And now, back to Tell Me I Have a Case with Dan Grimm and Matt Glenn.
And welcome back to segment 2 of Tell Me I Have a Case, the show where we ask you to take another look at the world of personal injury litigation. I'm Matt Glenn alongside Dan Grimm. We've been talking today about the importance of a jury trial and really the role of the public in our justice system. And I'm a history nerd, right? I absolutely love U.S. history, World War II, Civil War. But one of my favorite moments in history that I think really summarizes who we are as a country comes from the 1840s. And in the 1840s, our industry started outproducing the British industry. And they were shocked, right? They had been at this a lot longer than we had. They had better engineers, better universities, better education systems, and they couldn't figure out how our factories were outproducing them. So they sent over some representatives to try to discover it. And what they found was that, in America, because we are free, right? Every worker got up and went to work thinking, you know what? I know my boss has told me to do things this way, but if I come up with a better way, my boss will be happy to let me use that better way. In England, the king is in his castle, the lord is in his manor, and the factory owner tells the factory workers how to do their job. And they don't question that. But in the U.S., we do, right? And that sort of creativity, led to a lot of people going from working on the assembly line to owning their own factory. Real rags to riches sort of examples that have really defined what is best about us. But that creativity has a flip side to it, right? We have a saying in this country that, can we do something? A lot of times you'll hear people say, well, there's no rule against it, right? And that's often true. There's sometimes no rule against it, but that doesn't mean there shouldn't be, right? And if you do something that hurts somebody or puts somebody at risk, then you have to pay for that. I often say when you look at products or companies' behavior, there are only two ways for you to get a company to change what they're doing, right? Or to make a product more safe. One is regulation, and that's a one-size-fits-all sort of solution. The government hands down a regulation. Every company has to abide by it, whether they're a big company or a small company, whether the regulation directly applies to them or only sort of applies to them. That regulation governs how they do their work. But the other way is litigation. So it's either regulation or litigation. And you and I were talking about the most famous example that we could think of about litigation being the Pinto case, the Ford Pinto. When Ford was designing that vehicle, they came to the realization late in the process that the gas tank was in a place that meant that, well, the right kind of rear end impact, this thing is going to light on fire. And so they did an analysis, and they actually asked their attorneys for this analysis. They said, we're going to sell this number of cars. We therefore anticipate this number will get in this type of accident, and each time it gets in an accident, it will kill 1.75 people. And they actually asked the attorneys, how expensive will those wrongful death cases be? And the attorneys came up with a number. Well, that number was lower than it would have cost them to change the design of the Ford Pinto. And so Ford made the decision in that moment that they were going to go ahead and hurt people. They were going to go ahead and kill people instead of doing the right thing. And through litigation, they were obviously made to pay that. But companies, you and I see it a lot. Companies have moments of decision that they could choose to make a little bit less money and make their product safer, or they can choose to make more money and put profits ahead of people.
And we see that time and time again, and you hear the phrases profits over people's safety, and it's a capitalistic society, but that's where I believe, like you said, it's the civil justice system is much better because it's a case by case basis with 12 collective members of the community, as opposed to regulation, like you said, where one size fits all.
Right.
And regulation stymies capitalism, stymies creativity. And it underserves the community that is being regulated.
Yeah, but then if you're a company and you're training your employees and you're sending them out in a truck, you've got to take the philosophy that the person they hurt might be my kid, right? The person they hurt might be my family member or somebody important to me, because in our community we value people. And I know that you've had a lot of cases where companies didn't really live up to that.
Yeah, we see it time and time again, and you see it in a lot of trucking cases because the trucking industry, they're if the wheels ain't moving, per se, that they're not making money. So there's a big push with trucking companies to push their truck drivers to drive longer hours and greater distances. And through that, just through how human beings are, people get tired, they get worn out, and mistakes happen.
Right.
And so you see that when accidents happen, where a truck driver rear-ends somebody or a truck driver T-bones somebody, companies often, again, they'll either admit liability or sometimes they'll say it's not our fault. But where the big fight comes in is they lawyer up and they devalue or refuse to accept responsibility for the damage, the human loss that was taken by being hit by an 80,000-pound tractor trailer.
Yeah, and then what do you do in that situation?
So in that situation, again, it requires litigation, and that's where we're talking about today. It's so important because the community, the jurors, those 12 members of your collective society, your community, are going to decide what that value is for that human life that has been forever changed, injured, or lost because of that collision.
Mm-hmm. And so, all right, do you have a specific case in mind when you talk about something like that?
Yeah, so, the one that comes to mind is that happened in Cape Girardeau is that on 55, that there was cars driving southbound on 55, and a vehicle was on the other side of the roadway, and the vehicle stopped, and something happened to the vehicle. The guy had his dog in the vehicle, and the dog got out, as dogs do. And the dog shot across the northbound 55, ran across the median, and started proceeding across southbound 55.
Oh, boy.
And so, as cars do, they slow down because nobody wants to hit a dog. And another car slowed down, and another car slowed down. But this tractor trailer, who was probably driving at that point in time 10, 11, 12 hours, drove thousands of miles and was tired, wasn't paying attention, and smashed into the back of our client's vehicle. Again, liability was disputed because he claimed it was the dog's fault.
Right.
And so not only did he deny liability, but denied any responsibility for the horrific injuries that was caused to our client.
Yeah, and so 5 other cars were able to avoid the dog, but he wasn't. But somehow it's all the dog's fault.
Correct.
You see that a lot, and then in a case like that, you have the community come in and say, okay, well, this is what we think about it. And
right, and so we had a jury trial, and it was a 3-day jury trial, and the community decided that the injuries were caused by this tractor trailer not paying attention, and compensated or awarded damages of $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Something that on the truck company's own would never have done.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, there are countless examples of it. I had a case involving a wheelchair where my client's father was powering his powered wheelchair across the street to go see his daughter, and it was at night. And he, was in the habit of looking both ways. We think he did. He started to cross the intersection, and a car came along, going a little faster than the speed limit, and never saw him. Right, never saw him. There was nothing on that wheelchair, not one light, not one piece of reflective tape, nothing that would cause that car's lights to be able to pick up the fact that there was a wheelchair there. And so we filed suit against the wheelchair company, alleging that, you understand these things are going to go outside, you understand they're going to cross streets, and you understand that it's going to happen at night. It would cost you $1 to put a piece of retroreflective tape on the side of the wheelchairs, or some lights or something that would call a driver's attention to the fact that this person is crossing the street, and to give that driver an opportunity to hit their brakes and to give the person in the wheelchair an opportunity to live. The company disputed that, and they pointed to, well, there's no regulation, there's no law that says we have to. And we said, yeah, but it's common sense. It's common safety concern for people who are in a wheelchair attempting to navigate this world, and it would cost you $1. We filed that suit. We fought it all the way to the eve of trial before they settled. But, one of the fun things that I do from time to time is I'll see somebody in a wheelchair, and in some of the newer ones, these people, the wheelchairs will have lights on them, right? They'll have little glowy lights on the side, or they'll have tail lights on the back, something that would cause you to be able to see this wheelchair at night if you were driving by. That, that's the community, that's the power of the jury system making our products safer.
And what you just said made me think about that. Think about how many suits or litigations or verdicts have really kind of created legislation, statute, laws that make our communities safer.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you look at, Ralph Nader wrote a book in the 60s calling the Corvair unsafe at any speed. And the reason he did that was because it had a solid steering column that went from the wheels through to the steering wheel. And a collision at 15 miles an hour would cause that steering column to come through the chest of the driver. So that's all it took. A 15-mile-an-hour front-end collision was going to kill you, right? After they did a study on that steering column, some smart engineer came up with a 3-piece steering column that when it went through an impact, it broke into 3 pieces. So the steering wheel never came through the chest of the driver. Suddenly your car is safer. Suddenly you're not going to get injured or killed by a 15-mile-an-hour collision, or at least your chances of it are greatly reduced. And it's an example of how, the threat of litigation can cause your car to become safer.
Absolutely. I mean, which is the birth of airbags.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and seat belts and shoulder belts. Didn't used to have those. I mean, the list is endless.
My mother tells me when I was born, her, after her stay in the hospital, they wheel her down in a wheelchair. My father pulls up in his vehicle. Of course, had no seatbelts in it at the time. And she gets out of the wheelchair. They hold me, the baby, and she gets in the passenger side, and they hand me, the baby, to my mother, who's sitting in the front seat without a seatbelt.
Yeah.
And think about how things have gone as far as seatbelt and safety and baby seats, all because, the issue is that the people that create these products are in the best position to make the products safer and safer and safer.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, these companies that are manufacturing these products, they understand them on a level deeper than anyone else, and they're in the best position to know how to most efficiently make them safe. And the jury trial is the way that we hold them accountable for those decisions. I think it's a fantastic a way to do so.
Yeah, and I believe that. You also had a trucking case we talked about earlier about a situation where the truck driver was obviously not behaving in a safe manner.
Yeah, you and I actually worked that case together before we were law partners with different plaintiffs. But the truck driver in that case, it was a terrible accident. It happened on 55 southbound. My client was driving your client to the doctor because she was 8.5 months pregnant. And they slowed down for a hazard up ahead and got rear-ended by the truck. And I think the woman was actually ejected from the vehicle and killed. And they actually rushed her to the hospital where she gave birth to the child. They were able to actually save the child, though he was denied oxygen for a fair amount of time, and he does have some issues with walking and brain development, but he is alive. That truck driver, we got the data from his truck. He was going 75 and a 65, and he had been for as long as that data had been recording. And when we asked him why he went 75 miles an hour, he said, "Oh, the company lets us go 75 miles an hour." And I said, that doesn't make any sense. What do you mean they let you go 70? He said, no. They tell us that we're allowed to go up to 75 miles an hour. And, I thought if you weren't going 75 miles an hour, you would have been able to stop. And if you'd have been able to stop, there'd be a now 5-year-old kid out there who wasn't walking with a walker, right? Who didn't have brain development issues. But because that company made that decision to tell them, hey, drive 75 so that you can get where you're going a little bit faster. That mom is alive. The kid has his mom and has a shot at a normal life.
And it's so important because these roadways are shared by husband, wives, sons and daughters, mother and fathers. These roadways are shared by companies that are making profits off of using our highways and byways. Right. And it's so important that they do so safely because these vehicles weigh up to 80,000 pounds. Oh. And our standard vehicle that we drive is maybe 3,000 pounds. Yeah. And you don't stand a chance.
No, not even a little bit of one. So if you do get that jury notice, like Dan said, treat it as an honor. It is part of our history, part of who we are, and a very important part of how we make decisions.
And there's a quote by Martin Luther King that I really like. He said, "The moral arm of the law is long, but always bends to the side of justice." And that really hits me.
Yeah. Well, the man had a way with words, but it does speak to the importance of the jury trial. So you've been listening to Tell Me I Have a Case, the show where we ask you to take a second look at the world of personal injury litigation. For Dan Grimm, I'm Matt Glenn. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next Saturday.
You've been listening to Tell Me I Have a Case with Dan Grimm and Matt Glenn. If you have questions and need answers, contact Cook, Barquette, Ponder, and Wolves today. Just go to cbpw-law.com. See you next week for Tell Me I Have a Case. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and shouldn't be based solely on advertisements.